Hello, good evening, and welcome to Lates Online from the Natural History Museum. I'm Alison, and I'm your host for tonight. Now, if you're new to our online Lates, these events are all about finding ways to find fun, creative ways of engaging with our museum science and our scientists. Now, we've called tonight's event Making Monsters, and we are combining planetary science, evolutionary theory, and video gaming. And we're posing the question, what might alien life actually look like? Because life on Earth has evolved and adapted to all kinds of different environments, from the deepest ocean to the highest mountains, from dry deserts to grassy plains. But how would life evolve on a totally alien world with completely different environments and different evolutionary pressures? Now, to help us visualize what this life might look like, we are going to be playing with the creature creator from the video game Spore. So as we explore the science with our experts, you're going to be able to see our ideas and our creature creation taking shape on the screen. Now, as usual, with all of our online events, we love to hear from you, our viewers. So please don't be shy. Say hello, tell us where you're watching from. Very importantly, send us any questions that you might have during the course of the show. We'll do our very best to answer as many of your questions as we can. And if you're enjoying the event tonight, do consider leaving us a small donation. With our doors closed, we are losing vital income, so everything helps. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a donate button just by the chat, or you can go to our website, nhm.ac.uk/donate. And there should be a link coming up a little bit later in the chat window. But let's start, first of all, tonight by introducing our speakers. Now, first up, we have our monster maker for the evening, Khalil Thirlway. Khalil, are you there?
Hey, Alison. How's it going?
Hey, great. It is good to have you tonight. Now, Khalil, some of our viewers online might recognize you from our Nature Live online, but just introduce yourself and tell us what your role is tonight.
Hi. Well, yeah, as Alison said, I'm Khalil, and just like Alison, I'm a science communicator at the Natural History Museum, so we make all this kind of online content and video stuff. But tonight, as Alison said, growing up, two of my favorite things in the whole world were finding out how life works and computer games. So when I heard that they were going to make a video game about evolution, it's fair to say I was pretty hyped. And Spore came out a long time ago, but 13 years ago now, back in 2008. It makes me feel very old. And it was a pretty ambitious game. It took the player from a single-celled organism fighting for survival into this evolving land creature, then forming tribal and global cultures, and then ultimately inventing space travel and building a galactic empire. And like I said, it was pretty ambitious, especially for the time. And not every aspect of the game lived up to the vision of the creators or the expectations of the players. But one element that really stood out was the creature creator. So much so that it actually got spun out as its own standalone game in its own right. So tonight we're going to have a little bit of a look back at Spore's creature creator, partly to see whether it's still as good as I remember it, and partly so we can have some fun thinking about how life on other planets could evolve or could be like. And personally, I'm a sucker for any game that's got lots of customization and character creation options. So I'm going to be having fun whatever happens tonight.
I can't wait to see what you come up with. It's going to be awesome. Now, in order to kind of inform, to help us create our creations tonight, we're going to need some fairly solid science. So we are also going to be joined by some of our museum scientists. So first up, we have Louisa Preston.
Hi. Hi,
hey,
everyone.
Louisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. I am so chuffed that you're up for this tonight. Tell us first up what you do at the museum, what your research is.
So I'm an astrobiologist. I'm in the Earth Sciences department at the museum. I'm also on the science team for the European Space Agency's next Mars mission. So the ExoMars Rosalind Franklin rover goes next year. Everyone pay attention. I know, it's exciting. I'm a geologist by training, but I have a real love for biology, and I combine the two subjects to study and explore some of Earth's extremist environments, most extreme environments, and the life forms that live inside these places. And we use those as what we call analogues, places that mimic other places that we see on Mars or Europa, to try and understand how life might once have existed on these planets and maybe even exist now, and how we're going to find it.
It's brilliant. Astrobiology is such a cool subject. I'm so jealous. So yeah, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on our creations tonight. We are also going to be joined, finally, and last but by no means least, by another museum scientist. We have Matt Porter as well. Matt, are you there?
Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Looking
Brilliant
forward to creating some aliens.
Now, Matt, again, tell us what your role is at the museum.
Certainly. So I'm a curatorial assistant within the Earth Sciences department, looking after the paleontology collections. I'm a paleobiologist by training, but essentially what my job involves is doing various projects looking after the management and care of these extraordinary fossil specimens that show us a history of life on our planet, and obviously might inform what animals might look like on other worlds, depending on the habitats they live in.
Absolutely. So you're representing our earthly biology tonight, and I'm very jealous of all the fossils that you get to work with on a daily basis, Matt.
Quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few. Now, before we start pondering evolution on other worlds, I have to confess I'm not very familiar with the game Spore. So, Khalil, perhaps you could give us just a very quick kind of overview of the creature creator itself and how it actually works, just to give us a bit of an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. You could totally be forgiven for not being super familiar with it. You had to be into a certain type of gaming at a certain time. And in fact, we might even have some people watching who are younger than this game. Who knows? So let's go into the creature creator. So we start off with a kind of basic body plan, and you can generate new ones here. It's randomly generated. But once you've got one that's vaguely one you like, you can also start to really play with it. So you can, you've got a spine here, so I guess it has to be a vertebrate of some sort, but you can make it shorter or longer each end. And then you can also make parts thicker or thinner. So you can really play around with the fundamental body plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then once you've got that, you've got all these mouths. Let's give it a beak. Or you could even give it a beak up there. That could be its head. You've got all these sensory organs like eyes and ears and antennae. Let's give it one big ear on the tip of its nose. And then you've got all these arms and legs, hands, feet, and all these kind of decorations and accessories. And you've got a little budget down here, which is the amount of it's your DNA budget for the creature. So you can't necessarily put 1 million arms on it or anything, but you can still do quite a lot within that budget. Let's give it some quick legs just to show you. So this is, oh God, this is not how it's meant to look. And then over here, you can combine all sorts of textures and colors and patterns to really, get your creature looking fresh. And then here we have the test drive, where you can give it a little bit of a walk around and see it in action. This is not the best example. This is something I threw together very, very quickly right now. But this is where we're going to be spending most of our time in the kind of creation side of it. I personally can't wait to see what we come up with later on.
Definitely. And Khalil, this looks absolutely brilliant. It looks perfect for our purposes. So thank you. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Oh, and in perfect Blue Peter style, I've got some that I made earlier if we need to pull one out at the end for a look.
Naturally. Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Khalil. We'll see you again a little bit later on. But what we want to do tonight is to explore how different environments can shape life. An alien world is going to create unique opportunities and evolutionary pressures that we wouldn't necessarily find on Earth. So it's fun to imagine how alien creatures might adapt to these environments. Now, of course, we should say much of what we are exploring today is completely speculative. And we are going to be making some assumptions. For example, we're going to assume that what we're discussing tonight is going to be based on life as we currently know it. So no silicon-based life forms, no multi or pan-dimensional life forms, no conscious clouds, nothing like that, sadly. But what we can do is we can make some educated guesses based on our understanding of evolutionary theory and of planetary science as well. So let's start off, I think, with what we know about planetary environments outside of our own Earth. So let's hear from Louisa. Louisa, can you tell us what kinds of planetary bodies are actually out there? What have we discovered so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we should probably stick with our solar system first, stick with what we know, and we can talk about some really alien environments we have in our solar system and the kind of harsh environments that life would have to try and live in and overcome. So let's stick to our planetary siblings first, and let's go in towards the sun and talk about Venus. Now, we used to imagine back in the day that Venus was this lush, tropical, Earth-like paradise because it was nearer the sun. We now know that actually, if a human was able to land on Venus, we'd be instantly suffocated, boiled, melted, and squashed. It is not somewhere that we expect life to be existing, but you never know. This is based on what we understand of life. Mm-hmm. If we go to the other side of the Earth, then we have our other sibling, Mars. And instead of being super hot, Mars today is actually really cold. It has an average temperature of -60 degrees. It also has a toxic atmosphere of carbon dioxide. It's bathed in radiation. It's super dusty, and there is no liquid water. It's all frozen underneath the surface. So that's a really challenging environment for life to try and live in. But what we think is that in the past, Mars might have had a very different environment. And maybe now, if we look underneath the surface, we might see evidence of that past life hidden or maybe even surviving, buried and protected. But what we do find, which is always funny, is that the planets aren't actually that exciting sometimes. It's their moons that really have the interest for us. And so we're going to talk about some of the gas giant moons, so those of Jupiter and of Saturn. So if we go to Jupiter first, working our way chronologically out of the solar system, we have a couple of moons. So Io, I think, is an amazing moon. It's basically a lava world. It's just covered in volcanoes that are constantly erupting. So that's a very challenging environment for life. We also have the moon Europa. Now, Europa is a moon that has got a thick icy shell around the outside. And then hidden underneath is this huge, briny, salty ocean with twice as much water as we have on the Earth. This moon is actually somewhere that we think might be the most suitable place to find life today.
I'm so hoping for life on Europa.
I know, it would be so exciting, wouldn't it? It would take a while to get there, though.
It would.
I know. We'll look at Saturn. So Saturn's also got some exciting moons. One of them is Enceladus, and that's actually a lot like Europa. It's got this icy shell and this hidden ocean underneath. But Enceladus has got hundreds of gargantuan jets just erupting from its surface, like huge geysers. And they can soar several thousand kilometers out into space. And then actually they can quite often rain back down as snow onto Enceladus. And inside these jets, we find water, we find organic carbon-based molecules, so that all the ingredients for life are there. So who knows what might be happening there? And the other moon I love of Saturn is Titan. Now, Titan is really reminiscent of the Earth. It's got lakes, it's got mountains, it's got rocks, it's got clouds, it's got weather, it's got rain, but it's also very alien. And that's because it is so cold. The rocks on Titan are actually made of water ice. They're not made of minerals. The lakes are actually filled with liquid hydrocarbons like methane and ethane instead of water. And it rains hydrocarbons like oil instead of water. So it's a very strange and alien world close to home. But obviously, if we want to look at some really alien worlds, we need to leave our solar system. And so I was thinking of exoplanets, the kind of exoplanets, which are planets that are orbiting other stars in our galaxy. And so I've picked two out of the thousands and thousands that we could have chosen. So I'm sorry if I did not pick your favorite. The first one is called Proxima Centauri b. And I really like that one because it is orbiting the star that's closest to us. So it's kind of like our neighboring planetary family. We think it's a super Earth. So it's ever so slightly bigger than the Earth. We think it's rocky. And we also think that because it orbits so closely to its star, it might actually be able to have liquid water and maybe even an atmosphere on its surface. So that'd be a really interesting one to pay attention to. And the last one I've chosen has no chance for habitability as far as we understand it. However, it is super cool. And it's called Kepler-16b. Okay, we have terrible names. But the reason I like it is because it has another name, which is Tatooine. And it was called,
Fantastic.
I know, and it's called that because it was the first exoplanet we found that was orbiting 2 stars. And that means it has 2 sunsets and 2 sunrises. But it's nothing like Star Wars' Tatooine, I'm afraid. It's really cold. It's probably a gas giant, a lot like Saturn. But the reason why it's so interesting is because we know that half the stars in our galaxy are actually binary stars. So now we know that a planet can form around a binary star as well as a single one. That means there's so many more planets out there that we might be able to find that could house life.
Yeah, I was amazed to find out the number of planets we've already found, and there could be many, many more out there. So it's a tantalizing prospect. You just don't know.
You just don't know.
Now, let's bring Matt back in, because to date, we obviously only have one example of a planet that we know has life, our own. But Matt, even the Earth gives us some really interesting things to think about, doesn't it? Especially if we look at the entirety of evolution. Life has thrown up some really strange and unique life forms at different times. Some of them wouldn't look out of place on other worlds. So Matt, you've got a couple of examples that you want to show us, haven't you?
Yeah, so if you're thinking of alien organisms, I think we just jump straight in there and go full crazy. And I think of all the creatures and organisms that live in the Cambrian period, which is about 540 to 480 million years ago. A particular favorite of mine is hallucigenia. And scientists, when they first discovered these, couldn't tell which way up it was supposed to be for a long period of time. And couldn't make head nor tail of it, essentially. But since then, scientists seem to think that it's a type of lobopodian worm, so similar to your velvet worms. And I mean, if you're looking for alien creatures, I mean, it doesn't get much more alien than that. But even though it's very, very different from what we might expect life to look like, it does exhibit something that's quite common to at least 99% of all life on Earth, and that's bilateral symmetry. And we can see this in my next example, which is a trilobite. When people think of paleontology, they often think of these creatures. This is an early arthropod. And again, it exhibits that bilateral symmetry. So basically, it's got a head and a tail. And if you were to cut the organism lengthways, both sides would be mirror images of each other. And that essentially allows organisms to move with purpose or move in a particular direction, as I like to think of it, and cover a greater distance than if they were radially symmetrical, like starfish or sea anemones or something like that. There are also other added benefits of that. All the senses like eyes, ears, and mouth and that sort of thing, touch, taste, can be centered around the head area. So as it's investigating in one particular direction, that part of the body will encounter food first. And of course, food going in one end will be excreted out the other end, which I think is something we can all be grateful for. We're looking at you, jellyfish, in particular.
Oh, poor jellyfish.
I know, but well, yeah. Eating and pooing out the same orifice, not a nice look. But again, as I was saying, this is an early form of arthropod, so they have exoskeletons as a form of scaffolding for their body, which offers a greater amount of protection, but kind of restricts their movement and size. But another thing that we find is eyes in organisms. And an example here is a trilobite eye. It's called a compound eye. So you'd find this in sort of insects and arthropods, made up of many lenses called ommatidia. And these are very good at detecting motion. So as an object moves past these different lenses, they are switched on and off, and they're very good at detecting motion. So if you've ever tried to swat a fly and wondered why it's so difficult, it's because they are very good at picking up motion, but not so good at focusing in on things that are far away and creating a good resolution in terms of the image. So for that, our vertebrate eyes are probably better suited for that sort of imaging. But, again, confer advantages and disadvantages depending on the type of environment and lifestyle these organisms are living in.
Sure.
Next up.
No, go ahead.
Next up is early ancestor of chordates or backboned animals called Metasprogynia. And I love this little animal. It looks like something out of a Pixar movie, doesn't it? But,
it really does.
But essentially, what's interesting about this is that it had a notochord, and this was basically the precursor to vertebrae and spines in backboned animals. And it was a flexible rod that essentially is the main organ for supporting that tail. So going back again to this idea of propulsion and moving in one particular direction. It would also add support and protection for the complex nervous system of later vertebrates, and as the beginnings of an endoskeleton provide that scaffolding internally for these types of organisms. And that again confers its own sorts of advantages and disadvantages. So as opposed to the exoskeleton that I mentioned previously in trilobites and arthropods, an endoskeleton would provide less protection, but it could grow with the organism. So it doesn't put so much restrictions on size as an exoskeleton would. And it also allows for a greater range of motion as well. So quite useful in its own way. Another thing is, I don't know if you can see them, but there's these tiny little gill slits along the side of this organism. And the anterior gill slits that are around the mouth are starting to get thicker. And this is because over time, these would have allowed the mouth to grow larger, so it could swallow larger prey. And over time, this would have developed into the familiar jaws, which we see in sharks and placoderms, those bony fish that came along in the Silurian and Devonian, so the stuff of nightmares. But it's a common thing that we see in lots of organisms as well. And yeah, informs what life might look like on other planets.
Absolutely. So there are certain things that we would expect to see, some way of sensing the world, some way of getting energy. So all food for thought. Now, I'm aware that while we've been chatting, Khalil has been busily creating away in the background. So let's bring him in. Let's take a look at the creature that he's created. Let's see what we make of it.
So there were a couple of aspects of the conversation that I kind of latched onto quite hard. And one of them was the forward backward thing that Matt was talking about with bilateral symmetry. So this creature is all about what's in front of it, and all that talk of jaws. I thought I had to give it a big nasty pair of jaws. So this is, and you know, I don't know if Louisa and Matt can critique it, but this is meant to be an ambush predator on like a forested planet. So when it walks around, it gives people nightmares. Obviously, that's disgusting. You don't want to look at that.
Yeah.
But it spends most of its time lurking around, hiding, using its flower as a lure.
Nice.
Until it sees something in front of it and it grabs it and devours it. And so it's got those 4 big eyes all facing forward. So it's got a great depth perception. And, you know, I wonder what you guys think of it.
Well, first off, H.P. Lovecraft, eat your heart out, because that's some great work there, Khalil. I love the idea of this ambush predator, because we often see that in nature. I'm thinking of anglerfishes with the lure in front of their mouths. But a particular favourite instance of mine is essentially fireflies. There's a female species of firefly that essentially hacks in to the fireflies' signalling of other firefly species and lures males to them. And the male comes in for a quick little booty call and is unpleasantly surprised when the female turns around and gobbles him up. So the female of the species is definitely more dangerous than the male.
Good told you that.
Love it.
That's brilliant. I mean, his colour's great, isn't it? Because I love you too. Because the green, like, it's a forested world, so the camouflage of the green.
Camouflage, exactly.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
I mean, it's almost invisible, right?
Well, except for the pixelates.
Yeah, almost. I also like the eyes as well. You've given it not only 4 eyes, but vertebrate type eyes. So really good for, like you said, depth perception when it's trying to capture its prey. And those vertebrate eyes will give it really good resolution in terms of the image and the detail. So identifying its prey from possibly non-prey species, from reasonable distance away. So yeah, really good choice of words there.
Yeah.
It obviously thinks it's top of the food chain, doesn't it? Because there's nothing behind it. It's not worried about something coming up behind it.
Oh no,
Exactly.
absolutely not.
And those multiple arms as well for grabbing onto things that look absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, once those claws get into you, they're not going to let go. But I'm really looking forward to working on a creature whilst we all have a conversation about kind of alien planets and what it's like on there. Because I want to make one from scratch based on what you talk about.
Absolutely. So that's something we want to try next, because let's turn this around. Let's turn it on its head, and we can maybe define a planetary environment and create a creature that we think might survive there. So Louisa, I think you had a particular planet in mind, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I tried to go for a planet I think is going to give evolution a bit of a tough job. So I picked an exoplanet, obviously. It's called Gliese 832c, another classic name for our naming conventions. But I picked it because it's 9.5 billion years old, so nearly double the age of the Earth, which has given evolution enough of time to figure out what on Earth it's doing. It's a super Earth, but this one's 5 times bigger than us, so pretty big. And that means it has a much larger gravity, which is always a very important thing for life to have to deal with. We think it's a rocky planet. Oh, that's an artist impression. Before anyone asks, we have not taken a photo of this world. It's an artist idea. But it's a rocky planet. It will be quite reminiscent of the Earth. It's actually predicted to be an ocean planet. So none of this Kevin Costner Waterworld stuff, but just means there'll be large bodies of water on its surface, or maybe underneath. It could be either, but there is water is the key message. The difference with this world compared to ours is it orbits a red dwarf star. Now, these stars are smaller, cooler, and dimmer than our sun is. But what's also interesting is that the light that they give off is actually in the infrared. So that's something that life would have to deal with. To be able to support water and maybe even a really thick atmosphere, as you can see in this image, Gliese 832 is going to have to orbit very, very close to its star, dangerously close. And red dwarfs are well known in their early life for being quite angry and unpredictable stars. They burst out flares of radiation with a moment's notice. So life is going to have to deal with that. And then finally, another consequence of being so close to your star is that you can become tidally locked. And that means that one side is always going to be facing the star and it can't move away from it, even when it's going around. And it'll be in eternal sunshine. And then the other side will be in perpetual darkness. So a lot like how our moon is tidally locked to us. And that would be impossible. Well, we say impossible for life. I'm sure life finds a way, but it'd be really difficult because there'd be such a temperature difference between one side and the other. And one idea is that this thick atmosphere that this world might have these really strong winds that it could send around to try and disperse the heat for life. So that is a crazy world for evolution to have to figure out. And Khalil.
Definitely. Doesn't sound too promising at first sight, but there's a lot to work with there. Khalil's already having a go. So Matt, what kind of creature do we think could live on a planet like that? If we start with the general body size and shape that Khalil is creating at the moment.
Louisa, you've really laid down the gauntlet on that one, haven't you?
Yes. Build me a person.
So when thinking about body size, gravity is obviously going to play a big issue, whatever organism we're thinking about. So as I said, exoskeletons have an advantage in that they offer a great amount of protection, but they kind of limit size because they'll get to a certain size and they'll just be too heavy to, the organism to actually support it. So actually, I like what Khalil is doing here and actually using both a bit of exoskeleton and endoskeleton, and innie and outie, I think is the technical term.
That's my term. How I describe it.
So both, that's interesting because there are no creatures on Earth that have both, are there?
No. And this basically, an endoskeleton would grow with the organism, so allow it to get to a reasonable size, but the exoskeleton would actually offer it a greater amount of protection on this very, very hostile planet. Another thing is also being so close to the sun, the amount of solar radiation that these poor organisms are going to be exposed to is going to be a bit of a problem. So they're going to have some sort of covering to protect them. Some organisms are black in color because they have lots of melanosomes that can absorb the UV light, so to prevent damage to that, DNA. But this organism I like is having some sort of mineral coating, maybe a reflective coating, to protect it from that, damaging solar radiation. So I particularly like that.
Absolutely. I mean, we would always say that one of the key things about evolution over and over again would be, if you're going to create an organism, it would have to have some kind of a skin, maybe not a skin like us, but something to keep all the bits together. But on a world like this, that skin, I mean, the opportunities could be endless. It could have bioluminescence on it, so that when it's on the dark side, it can light up where it's going. It could have pigments in it that, like plants have, like chlorophyll, so that if it's on the sunny side, it can create energy using its skin, as well as eating other organisms if they are available. So skin's a pretty cool thing to have.
Skin's an amazing thing. And actually the morphology is really quite flexible as well. I mean, we know from examples of ants that exhibit polymorphism. So depending on the types of food they receive as larvae, they can change into quite different forms, like giant soldier ants that are almost 10 times the size of the workers and large jaws. So we can have an organism that essentially exhibits that polymorphism, so could live on both the light and the dark sides of the planet. So on the light side, as Louisa was saying, it has bioluminescence, and maybe it's a bit colder on that side of the planet, so it will be a bit stockier to allow for fat reserves to keep it warm. It might even exhibit hair or something, who knows, to keep it warm.
What about senses, eyes, for example? Because it's a twilight world that it would potentially live in. Would it have eyes? What kind of eyes? And how would they see if it's infrared light?
That's really interesting. I might defer to Louisa on how it would see.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, no, I think I know it's my fault. I think the thing is that it will all be, and there's no pun intended here, it will all be in the eye of the beholder. So as far as the organism is concerned, it would just be seeing things the correct way, just because of the light. But from us looking at it, it might appear black. And it will all just depend on how the eyes are trying to use the light. So we want to take all the blue photons and the red photons out of the sun's rays to try and give, energy to the organism, and so the organism can see. And that's why when we see plants and everything on the earth, we see it as green, because it doesn't use it. It's not useful. So it might be exactly the same there. You just don't know. But I think, given the twilight nature of it, I think the more eyes, the better. And I think probably other senses, so like a big nose, maybe even sensitive skin, in its feet, paws, that kind of thing. I think there'll be a lot more senses that will be needed to be brought into this, for sure. I like the stocky legs. You're going to need stocky legs on a high gravity world, that's for sure. Oh my goodness, what is going on? Oh, you saved them away. We're quite enjoying that.
I know, yeah. So we've got, what is it, four legs and two, are they arms? I'm not even sure what they are. Or maybe some sort of arms.
I like the way it stands though. I mean, if you can imagine a world with really strong winds trying to keep the planet heated, you're going to want more than just two legs to try and keep you grounded. Absolutely. Definitely. For sure. And maybe even the tail, that would really help as well.
Yeah, so that tail would really help with balance, and that's again taking the basic assumption of bilateral symmetry again and moving in one particular direction. So again, all the senses are at one end, and
Do you think maybe the arms and the tail combined look like it could be something that could go in the water? So maybe it's one of those organisms that could live on both the land and the water, depending on hide in the water from all the radiation, and then when that flare passes, it comes back out again.
Yeah. And another thing about the really long tail and head is that bilaterally symmetrical organisms are often quite streamlined as well. We see that in fish and things like that. So yeah, I can see, if it tucked those legs under, just dives into the water. And maybe that's where its prey is. That's where it might do its hunting and live in essentially two different habitats. Partially in land and partially in the water. We see that with crocodiles, for example. They're terrestrial animals, but they spend a lot of their time hunting and moving around in the water. So they've got long tails and relatively small legs and a streamlined appearance. So
yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the water would be great because the buoyancy of it would really help with a high gravity world. Life would find it a lot easier to evolve in the water than it would on the land. So he looks very happy. I'm assuming it's a he. That's probably true.
I also really like.
Does it have
We're
a
playing
gender?
with the pigment. We're playing with the pigment, which is quite interesting. I like the idea of having like symbiotic bacteria in their skin, so they can get energy from two different sources. So hunting and then potentially absorbing energy. That would be very cool.
Looks
Maybe
like a very
it's like-
potentially adaptable animal, because look at the snout as
Like a
well. That
chameleon.
doesn't strike me as either a carnivore or a herbivore, but maybe an omnivore. And generalists often do better in environments where food is not so plentiful. So it could maybe take advantage of any opportunity it comes across on this planet.
That looks painful, Khalil. Whatever you're drawing, that looks painful.
It's absolutely brilliant. We're now adding defenses, it looked like.
Oh my goodness! I know. Oh, he looks so
Look at it
happy.
go.
I like the
I'm
color
very
changing.
happy.
Like being able to change your skin color is probably a very useful adaptation for sure.
This is absolutely brilliant. So what do we think, guys? Do we think we've got our finished creature here? Are we happy with what Khalil's created? Is there anything else we would add?
I'm trying to think. Do you know, the only thing I would probably change is the background. I think it's a little bit optimistic that
It
there
is a little bit, isn't it? But
that much lush. There we go.
there you go.
That's much more like it. I think on a high gravity world, if you had trees, they would be very much like you see in the desert. They'd be short and squat, and they'd have massive leaves to catch as much light as they possibly could from this like little star. And so, yeah, I don't think they'd be all lush and Hyde Park-esque. I just don't think that would quite work for them. But yeah, that hellscape looks a bit closer.
It really does. It looks perfect. And we can't really get a huge sense of the scale there, but I'm imagining quite a smallish creature, not too hefty because of
So probably the
gravity.
size of a cat, I would imagine. would
Yeah,
probably be
yeah.
best.
That is a violent cat.
A very, very, terrifying cat. It's absolutely brilliant. We've had someone, one of our viewers, saying the mouth is a herbivore mouth. I don't know. I think more omnivore. Do you, Matt?
I think possibly more of an omnivore. I kind of see like a bit of tusks, and I don't know, can you get its mouth to open, Khalil? Like, did it have like molars at the back? And
Oh, that's a bit technical.
yeah, it's
Khalil,
pretty
could you
much.
please give it?
I
all
don't
the
think we can.
teeth?
Yeah, I don't think we can get into that much detail.
I think I can see incisors, canines, and molars in that mouth. So
Oh,
I'm going to go with my.
Oh,
my.
wow.
That looks good. Ah.
It's absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm very happy with our little our creature here. We've had a question actually from one of our viewers. They were asking if you have seen documentaries like Alien Planet, based on the book Expedition Extraterrestrials by National Geographic, or the new documentary Alien Worlds. Have either of you seen those?
Yes, yeah, I was actually a consultant on on the Alien Worlds very early on in the beginning. But yeah, I think they're brilliant. I mean, the brilliant thing about this is that we have no idea. We have absolutely no idea. So we look at the Earth and we say, right, what's happened? What could happen in the realms of science? And then we just tweak it that little bit and just, push the boundaries. This is the fun bit of science. They always say science is such a matter-of-fact subject, but actually it's super creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed the latest documentary. I thought it was fantastic. Let's bring Khalil back in to just very briefly chat with him about his marvelous creation.
We applaud him for excellent
well
work.
done. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Noah, age 7, who's watching online, said he thinks that it's an omnivore because they usually have beaks, and this creature looked like it has had sort of a beak with teeth. So best of both worlds.
It looks like it could take on, eating meat or even killing and eating another organism, but also kind of rooting around in the soil maybe. Because if you're living on what sounds like a pretty harsh planet, you got to take every opportunity you can to get food, right?
That's right.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And I'm
Great
glad you guys
idea,
picked up on the. I'm glad you guys picked up on the reflective crystals in the back. That was exactly what I was going for.
That was a very nice touch.
And because it was on a water world, I called it Kevin. I just couldn't not.
Oh, Kevin.
I mean, it needed a name.
It needs a name.
And Khalil, while we've got you, we had a question come in a little bit earlier on that I think that you could answer. It was about the game itself. Tasha was asking if it's available to anyone. Can they find it and play it?
Yes, Spore is still available. Either the creature creator on its own or the whole game. I got mine on Steam. You can get it on the is it EA Play, the subscription service, or you can get it on its own. And there's a couple of expansion packs as well. There's one called Creepy and Cute, where you get basically a bigger library of parts for your creature creator. And then there's one that's more focused on having more space adventures when you get to that stage of the game. But I don't know. For me, I went back and I played the whole game again in preparation for this show because, I've got such a tough job. And I did remember how a lot of the bits of the original game were a little bit disappointing. I think they were trying to do a lot with this game. But the one thing that they really nailed was the creature creator.
Definitely.
I feel like they were almost ahead of their time, because by that point, like all these exoplanets we didn't actually really know about yet. And so now it's almost, I feel like it's coming back into its own now. Like we could have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, absolutely. And when you start a new game, when you're playing the whole game, you pick a planet in the galaxy and it has randomly generated kind of, landscapes and stuff. And it populates it with a range of species, either that you've made or that are pre-made with the game. And then when you go into a spacefaring empire civilization type thing, you can kind of travel from planet to planet and explore the galaxy. And you can actually find Earth. It's the Milky Way, the galaxy that they built. So, I think it might be worth a replay. Maybe we can do another long play.
Oh, we are sadly almost out of time. There was one very quick question I just wanted to put to you guys, because it was a really good one that came in just recently, asking, was our creature cold or warm-blooded? We hadn't thought of that, had we?
Warm-blooded.
I would have said warm-blooded.
Yeah, I'd say warm-blooded too.
Endothermy would be quite a useful feature of an organism, I think, being able to regulate its body temperature if the environment is as harsh and potentially as cold or as hot as it can be. So yeah, I would go endothermy.
Even though it looked like it probably was cold-blooded.
Yeah. Well, under the exoskeleton, it's a mixture of both our little abominations. So
maybe it doesn't conform to our terrestrial standards of endo and exo, cold and hot blooded. Maybe it can somewhat regulate its own body temperature, but because it exists on either side of this hot cold divide on this tidally locked planet, maybe it uses its environment to heat itself up or cool itself down when it needs to. Just like if you're cold, you might go out into the sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do we know? Life knows more than us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the takeaway message.
Well, we are completely out of time. We could talk about this for hours. I've had so much fun. This has been brilliant. I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight and really going for it. It's been great fun speculating, and I think we came up with a fantastic creature for our planet. Sadly, we have to say goodbye to our guest for night. Again, thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to have you back on at some point soon, but we'll say goodnight for now.
Good night.
And thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us, for supporting the museum, for your brilliant questions. We hope you enjoyed that event. If you did, there's still time to give us a brief donation. You can use the donate button on YouTube, or you can go to our website, nhm.ac.uk/donate. Hope you enjoyed that event as much as we did. You can catch up with some of our previous lates on our YouTube channel. There's lots of great content there, so do take a look. And of course, we will be back next month with another Lates Online. So I hope that you'll join us then. We'll say goodnight for now.